Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180 with your host Clay Kerner, and I'm Marty Pay. Clay, I wanted to thank my old buddy, our Board of Equalization member, George Runner, for coming on the show last week. It was a pretty good show.
Yeah, George has got a lot of knowledge.
Yep. I wish we had more people in office like George and Sharon. They're a great couple, and I'm glad they've decided to be in public service. They're great. They're dynamite.
It's too bad they have no power.
Since they're Republicans, I totally understand. Next week, we've got a great show. The first half, we have Russell Johnson, the city council member from Ward 7 here in Bakersfield. And the second half of the show, we have another old friend who's been on the show before, the new director of the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, Brandon Martin.
Oh, Brandon, yeah, it's a great job for him.
Yeah, he's perfect. You talk about typecasting.
And then who'd we meet at lunch today? Rudy Salas,
yes.
city council person.
Yes, so Rudy wants to come on, so we'll have him on sometime in the next couple of weeks. Before we introduce our in-studio guests, I want to make a little comment about the big event this week, and Clay and I have talked about this. He really didn't want to mention it, but I can't let it go without at least saying something about it. I give our president some credit for what he did this week. He almost blew it by waiting, but he finally did drop the hammer and finish the job that President Bush started 10 years ago. I also agree with President Obama's decision about not releasing the pictures, but for a totally, totally different reason. I spent some time in the military, and I remember the idea behind this kind of operation is to kill the man and what he represents. Showing those pictures of a mutilated body isn't going to help, and it's not going to end terrorism. Using the information we picked up and killing more of those leaders will. So if we're going to be there, President Obama, give the troops a clear objective, which you haven't done in the past. And then once they do the job, they finish that clear objective, let the troops come home. It's just that simple. Give us a clear objective that our troops can go after like they did last week. So, with that done, let's shift gears. The California Citizens Redistricting Commission has been traveling around the state doing their dog and pony show. Last week they were in Lancaster, and a couple weeks ago they were here in Bakersfield. Our in-studio guests, who both attended the redistricting meeting in Bakersfield, are my old friend Ted Fowler, who spoke at the meeting here in Bakersfield, and an old friend of the program, the man who brought Meg Whitman down to meet Clay Kerner, Michael Bowers.
Welcome, guys.
Howdy.
How you doing?
I would call it the corrupted redistricting commission.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to comment about Michael bringing Meg Whitman down here to meet you that one day.
Well, that was nice of her, but, not my type.
He doesn't do billionaires.
You got to get close to the mic, Mike. Before we get into our conversation about redistricting, Ted, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Obama Motors. Tell us your story.
Oh, one of my favorite subjects. As you know, Marty, I'm a former General Motors automobile dealer, and subsequently, believing in General Motors, I put most of my retirement money in General Motors stock.
After you sold the dealership?
After I sold my dealership, yeah. Well, I bought stock all along, and we inherited some shares of General Motors since my father-in-law was also a GM dealer. Most of our retirement was tied up in General Motors stock. You notice I say was?
Yes.
Because today it is absolutely worthless. It's not worth the paperwork to redeem it.
Okay, now, and you and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but part of bankruptcy is, weren't you supposed to get stock, theoretically, the way bankruptcy laws work, in the new corporation, in the new General Motors?
Well, the way it normally would work is General Motors should have filed bankruptcy, and the courts should have decided for them who was going to get what assets, money after the assets were distributed of General Motors. Or if they were just going to reorganize, my stock would have remained as GM stock, and I would have had an opportunity to recover some of the loss. I also own some Ford stock, and that's exactly what happened with Ford. The courts reorganized the Ford organization. They made them take a hard look at some of their contracts and obligations, but they left the shareholders' stock in place. Now, Ford is working its way back up, and ultimately I will get some value out of my Ford stock. I have no hope of doing that with General Motors because they just flat took it away from us.
So basically what they did is they rewrote 100 years worth of bankruptcy law and Did it just, in essence, to why? Save the union?
Well, it was basically what they did was a union bailout. It all goes back to May of 2009. There was just a total corruption. I believe it was all orchestrated because the deals that were put together in 2 or 3 days' time, and as you well know, I mean, it would have taken a whole community full of lawyers to put those deals together that fast.
Sure.
I think that everything was all preset. They knew exactly what was going to happen. The money went to bail out the unions and the bondholders, which were the unions, and the shareholders are the ones that took the bath.
We're having a conversation with Ted Fowler and Michael Bowers. So, Ted, in essence, what happened was, because when this all broke down, the stock was worth about, what, $159 a share?
Well, yeah. I bought stock over several years period, and my cost per share was around $150 per share is what I spent for it.
And what was it worth at the end of this?
Well, they didn't allow us to actually retain GM stock. What they did is converted that GM stock to a holding group, and that holding group stock is worth nothing. It's worth 12, 13 cents. It's just worth nothing. So it's not worth the money that it would cost to redeem it.
So in essence, from $159 a share to 12 or 13 cents a share.
Yeah. Basically, they just took it away from us.
Yeah. And you had mentioned the bondholders. The bondholders were in essence, the unions.
Mostly, yeah. Okay. Basically, the unions and the big, huge investors were the bondholders. They didn't, and the executives, they held bonds, and so therefore they didn't get hurt. Mm-hmm. It was the shareholder, the common guy, that invested his money in General Motors, and I invested in General Motors because I was told my whole life, if it's good for General Motors, it's good for the country.
Sure.
And I just knew that it was a blue chip stock that would just never go away. And I hung in there. I watched the stock dwindle, and I thought, ultimately it's got to come back because it's GM. Well,
what's more American than GM and apple pie?
Right.
I mean,
Not much else.
Yeah.
Who made these decisions to do that?
I really couldn't tell you. I don't think it was elected officials. I think the deals were put together amongst the lawyers and the union heads and some of the higher up political leaders.
Mm-hmm. Let's finish up with that when we come back, and then we'll talk a little bit about the redistricting. We'll be back in a minute on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.